Hi, this lesson is a very basic introduction into time value of money concepts. We're going to start with a real simple example. Say that you had $100 in your pocket and you go down to the bank and you put in the bank and they tell you that you can earn 10%. Well, how much money will you have in the bank in a year? If you earn 10% on the 100, you get the 10 plus the original 100 you invested back, and you get 110. I think most of you probably intuitively got that right away. But let's put some math around it that will help us solve more complicated problems. So what I'm doing is taking the amount we invested and I'm multiplying it times the sum of 1 plus the interest rate. And that equals our $110 that we earned. Now I'm going to add a little exponent here. I'm raising the 1.1 to the power of 1 because we're going to use that 1 later. But the math that you used intuitively, if not explicitly, was taking the 100 times 1.1. Now this $100, we call this the present value. It's the present value of the $110. And we call the $110 the future value of the $100, of the present value. And this number here, this 1.10, that transforms the $100 present value into the $110 future value, we call this the future value factor. Okay, now let's do something just a little bit more complicated, but not much more complicated. We're going to start with the same $100, starting with the same $100, and instead of at year 1, we want to know how much that grows to in year 3. So we're going to start with 100, and the question is, what is this future value here? Using the same idea we had before, we're going to take 1 plus the interest rate. Now instead of raising it to the first power, we're going to raise it to the third power. And if you get your calculator and do that math, you will see that $100 invested for 10% over 3 years is $133. Whoops. $133. So the present value of $100 invested for 3 years at 10% is 133. Now let's do something that it may seem a little silly, but we'll see in a second why it's helpful to think about this problem. If someone told you, I have an investment for $133 that will pay $133 in 3 years, how much would you be willing to pay for that? Well, if you knew you had to earn 10%, we would just do what we did before, but a little bit in reverse. Instead of multiplying by 1 plus the interest rate raised to the power of 3, what we're going to do is divide by it. So 1.1 raised to the power of 3. Now this is going to seem a little bit, this next thing I'm doing here, I'm going to stretch it out. I'm going to pull that factor out. It's going to seem a little bit ridiculous, but just to be consistent with the formula that we had before for the future value factor, I'm going to separate this out into its own factor, 1.10 raised to the power of 3. And if you do all this math, no big surprise, you get 100, and your mystery present value over here is $100. Okay, and this factor right here, which was the future value when we used it to calculate the future value, is now the present value factor. All right. We can take these examples and put them in a general form, and we can use these formulas for any lump sums. So if we want to calculate the future value, we can take the present value times 1 plus the interest rate raised to the number of periods. And if we want to calculate the present value, we can take the future value, which is a lump sum cash flow in the future, times 1 over 1 plus the interest rate raised to the number of periods or the number of years. So even though these are very simple formulas, they'll always work. Doesn't matter if it's 100 years or 1 year. As long as the interest rate stays the same throughout the period and all the interest earned is reinvested, these formulas will work for any single lump sum present value or future value.